pilots, DrainMan here, and today I have got a very special video. In today's video, we're going to be checking out the Lumenier LUX HD H7 flight controller, and it's literally called the ultimate flight controller. And there are very few, and I mean very few, flight controllers on the market that can do half of or 3/4 of what this flight controller can do. It is truly an ultimate flight controller, and it's in stock and available right now for purchase. I'm super excited because whatever your needs are, this flight controller, which has been overlooked, can fit your needs. So if you are at all intrigued or enjoy flight controllers in our FPV world, you are not going to want to miss this. Let's go. All right, pilots, so there are two types of pilots. There are the simple ones that just want the simple, basic things that they need to fly. And then there's your pilots that just gotta have it all. Doesn't matter what it is, what it can do, am I gonna use it, not gonna use it, doesn't matter, I got to have it. And this flight controller here is for that type of pilot who just absolutely has to have it all, because I mean, unless you're looking for a specific usage that nothing else can carry, which this guy probably does, and then you went ahead and said, okay, nothing else is doing what I need it to do, so I am going to go ahead and get myself the Lumenier LUX HD H7. This flight controller is like the flagship H7 flight controller, kind of like its predecessor, the F7 Lumenier LUX flight controller. So I want to go ahead and check this board out together with you guys, because there is a lot of ground to cover. So let's go ahead and crack this puppy open. So I do want to show you that it's actually in stock. You can see right here, you can purchase it right now at this moment for $119.99. That's quite the price tag, but once we go over it more, you're going to understand why it has that. So it is compatible with Betaflight, ArduPilot, and iNav. I believe the iNav compatibility is still in production, but once it's ready, you'll be able to run it as much as you want. So if we crack this puppy open right on top, oh my God, look at that. Whew. Okay, that is one hell of a processor right there on top, and it is beautiful. So inside of the package, up under the foam, we have not much, just a few connectors. You do get your grommets, but they come already installed. You do have, let's see, we've got two ESC connectors, and then we've got one long one, which is actually obviously for DJI, and you can tell because you have the plug and play on this side, and then you have the plug and play on this side. So this is pretty awesome because yes, this is an HD flight controller, so it will run DJI perfectly fine. If you're running a Vista, you cut this off and solder them up, and you have your same plug and play amazingness, okay? Now, you also get a couple of empty connectors if you want to get creative and depin and repin things in the way that you want them. They may be different, or maybe you're not pairing with an ESC that runs it exactly the way that this has it, and that's not a problem. You depin them and you put them in the order that you want them. If you don't know how to do that, I do have a video on how to wire any 4-in-1 ESC, and I will put that video link down in the video description. Go ahead and check that out. Holy cow, this thing is absolutely gorgeous. Look at this flight controller, and you can see that it is covered from head to toe in pins, connectors, solder pads. I mean, everything you could ever ask or wish for is on this guy, and we're going to go over all of it. I do want to point out it is a 30 by 30 form factor. That means it's going to fit in your standard build. You've got all kinds of things to go over here. Let's talk about this. This is a USB Type-C connector. It is far superior than the micro USB because it's faster, it's better, it's stronger, and it's definitely not directional. You can plug it in up or down, so you can't beat that. and this guy is just ready for business. Now, let's go over some of the main features. What are some of the most important things that this board has and does? One of the main features that this board carries is the H7 microprocessor, and this thing is running at 480 megahertz, and you could tell in comparison to this F7 that it is just magnificently bigger than this one is. So that lets me know already that there's got to be a lot more happening if it's that much bigger. If I go ahead and flip this board over, you'll see on the back side another big feature is that it's rocking dual IMU. I've got an MPU 6000 and I have an ICM 2602 right here on the back side. So we're getting the best of both worlds right here on one board. It also has Betaflight OSD right here on board. We've got two plugs right here, and that's not for no reason. You can plug in two ESCs and this guy will run them both like it ain't nothing. Another awesome feature of this board is we have dual BECs on board. We are running a 5-volt regulator right here. This is a switching regulator and the circuit that powers it. And then right underneath, you're going to see the 9-volt circuit and everything that powers it. That means that we can run all of our regular stuff at 5 volts, but if I have anything special, DJI for example, maybe I want to power that guy while running 6S, but I don't want to put a BEC all stuffed up in my build and wiring and heat shrink and everything that comes with that. Being an H7 MCU, it's got 1 megabyte of RAM and 2 megabytes of flash. We've got the dual gyro that we talked about. We've got an Infineon barometer. Holy cow. That means if you're wanting to get altitude and all kinds of other things, this board can do it. We've got onboard OSD. We've got the black box micro SD card socket or extension. So what does that mean? That means if you flip this board over and you want to do data logging, you'll take your SD card, you'll lay it right here and slide it in. Boom! So although almost all flight controllers can do this, they either have an SD card socket like this one or they will have an actual onboard flash. Let's go ahead and pull this SD card out so it's out of our way for the time being. And continuing on, we have 7 UARTs. I don't know why you would need 7, but if you did, you have got them all. You can connect everything you want on this one single board. 13 PWM outputs. That means we have 12 outputs, and then we have an LED pad that if we're not using LED, you can remap it and make it the 13th PWM. What is that? That is your motors, for example. You can run 13 motors. Why would you? I don't know, but you could if you wanted to. We've got 2 I2C ports, 1 CAN bus port, 6 times ADC. Oh my God. This board has everything. We have the 2.0 USB Type-C. We've got the 2 connectors for the 4-in-1s like we talked about. That's these 2 guys right here. And then we've got a connector for DJI. We've got dual camera inputs. Whew. What does that mean? That means that you can put 2 analog cameras on here, right? Let's just say, like you all must have seen, where you put one in the front, one in the back. You can put them on a switch, and it literally, it's wired and ready for this. We talked about the 9-volt reg that it has on board, right? That's this batch of circuitry right here. But they went ahead and doubled down and assigned a switch to it. So what does that mean? That means that whatever you have wired to this 9 volts, maybe you did something crazy like I did, and you attached a laser to your drone, which I did and have a video on if you want to check that out. Super awesome, by the way. We are covered from head to toe in pins. I want to take a few minutes and jump into the Scopy Scope and just go over some of these. Make sure that you're getting the most out of your Lumenier LUX HD H7 board. All right, pilots, there are a ton of connectors on this board, so we're not going to go crazy, but we are going to cover them real quick. So let's go ahead and dive into the board and see what we got. All right, so there's our SD card socket like we talked about. Right here, you are going to notice a jumper. This is a R6-S bus connector. This is pretty important because if you are running DJI, you'll want to make sure that you bridge this. If you're bridging this pad, what it's going to do is it's going to allow for R6 to become live for S-Bus. So what does that mean? That means that we need to find R6. Where are you? So there's R6. So you would use this right here and solder that up to S-Bus for your DJI controller. So while we're on the back side of the board, I do want to go over a couple things real quick. And there's not much to cover for the simple reason that we've already gone over the 5-volt reg, 9-volt reg, dual 4-in-1 connectors. We've gone over the Betaflight OSD. We've gone over the dual gyro. We've also mentioned the barometer. And then we've got a couple other things, nothing too important, some LDOs, things like that. Other than that, all of these pins and connectors and solder pads are all available on the other side of the board. So we're going to focus on these on the other side. They are labeled on both sides, but we will just use the top of the board to go over them. But on the bottom side of the board, there are two things that we do not see. One of them being this boot button right here, which, I mean, we all know what that's for, and you can use it if you want to. And then you've got your SWD, SWC, and a 3-volt 3. The 3V3 is nothing more than a 3.3 volt source. You can use it for testing and things like that. Now, the SWD and the SWC are your data and your clock pins for your serial wire debug. So if you were going to do some debugging, you would go ahead and connect to these pads. You can power it right here with the 3.3 volt pad, and you're able to do what you need to do, okay? If you don't know what that is, then you probably have no reason to want to use it, but on most boards, they are there, believe it or not. They're just not labeled. Right here, our very first few pads that you're seeing your C2. This is your camera 2, and the reason why there's a camera 2 is because right here there is a C1. Camera 1, camera 2. You've got your power for them, your ground for them, power for it, your ground for it. And if they need 5 volts, you got 5 volts here. And by them being separated like this, you can actually switch between them. Okay? And what makes this super cool is they are laid out where they can both be wired nice and easy, nice and simple. You don't have to buy any external hardware or anything like that because running 2 cameras is pretty creative and you can do some awesome stuff. So as we mentioned, this board actually has 7 UARTs on it, and that is just one of many. So RX3, TX3 makes one, RX1, TX1 makes another, TX4, RX4 makes another. You've got plenty of pads here, 9 volt, 5 volt, 5 volt, double ground, and your VTX pad. And your VTX pad is for the video out of your transmitter. So if you're running an analog transmitter, that will be the wire that connects to the video out on that device. Okay, so we've got 3 little circle pads right here that are some of the pads that make this board absolutely incredible depending on what you're running and what you're doing. So let's go ahead and run over them real quick. You've got the VB2, which is going to be a voltage divider pin. So it's just a voltage pin with a voltage divider built into it. That's pretty cool. Now, next to that, we've got a CU2, which is going to be an external current sensor attachment. If you wanted to attach anywhere from 0 to 3.3 volts, you can do that right there on this current 2 pad. And next to that, Air S is an analog airspeed sensor with a voltage divider built in. How cool is that? So that's some of the things that make this board as wickedly awesome as it is. All right, so here are some pads that are not through pads. If I flip it over, you can see that it's blocked by these. Most of you guys already know what to do with an LED pad, so I won't go over that, but this is the pad that we would remap if we wanted to use our 13th PWM signal. Now, the rest of these, for the most part, is going to be the 12 that we just talked about, right? Signal 1, 2, 3, 4, swinging down 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then that 13 if you wanted it. And holy cow, that's a lot. All right, we've got another UART here. So that is RX8 and TX8. The UARTs just keep going and going. Now we've got our built-in current sensor. So let's just go ahead and talk about this real quick. VBAT, ground, current sensor 1, and then you have S1 through 8. All of that is going to be available right through these connectors right here, okay? Just be sure that you don't dual put input of voltage, if that makes any sense. Do not take two different points on this board because this board does accept voltage in many different places. Don't take two outside places and input voltage into this board. I mean, other than powering it up in a USB, that's about it. Shooting over to these pads, we have a full UART here again, TX7, RX7, another full UART, TX2, RX2, very nice. We've got a 5 volt and a ground. Now, we have a ground and a 4V5. What is that, DrainMan? Well, that there is just under 5 volts, but it is powered by the USB. Here we go, heading over to these 4 magical pads right here, and that is CTS7 and RTS7. And what these are is these are for Ardu Pilot telemetry. If you're not familiar with Ardu Pilot, it is a open source, very versatile program that can run all kinds of things from hovercrafts, submarines, planes, quadcopters, you name it, it does it. If you're using this board for some of the awesome things that it can do outside of FPV drones, those pads are going to mean something to you. Moving right along, we have a DA1 and a CL1. So that is your data and your clock, and it is for an I2C sensor. If you don't know what I2C is or I2C is, it is another type of serial communication. It's funny that we just hit those pads and discussed an I2C because right over here is a CH and a CL. So what is that? That is your CAN bus high and your CAN bus low, and this is another type of serial communication protocol, and it actually requires its own little chip that you'll see right here. How cool is that? And what this is another type of communication. So they are all very unique in their own way, right? So you have the CAN bus, and then you have, like, for example, you have a I2C like we just talked about and we just saw the pads. Something like that is more used for sensors or modules, things like that. UARTs are what we use to talk from our actual flight controller to different auxiliary ports like a receiver or maybe an air unit, things like that. So they have many different functions. UARTs are a tad bit different because they can support bidirectional, asynchronous, and serial data transmission as to oppose to the other ones which handle things differently. Some are speaking across the two poles, right, RX and TX, differently, right? So one may be just talking with one, meanwhile the other one is sending on one and receiving from another. Maybe it's speaking on both there and back at the same time, and we can get more into this later. If you guys are interested in that, let me know because I would love to make a video on it. All right, so right next to this, we've got a 5 volt and a ground. Obviously, whatever you're communicating with this, you're going to need to power it. If you wanted to power it all the time, like through USB, like we just talked about, that is what that's for, that 4V5 or just shy of 5 volts. You've got another ground, and then you've got a full UART here. Another UART. So we've got our last 6 pads. We've got our buzzer minus and a 5 volt. That would be where you'd connect your buzzer. You've got a ground for any one of these devices that you need to ground. Obviously, you cannot connect your buzzer to 5 volts and ground because then it won't shut off. So you need to have your buzzer connected to 5 volt and ground here. And then right here, we've got an CL2 and a DA2. So this is your clock and data for another I2C protocol spot to connect. So if you had another sensor or more modules that you wanted to connect to this area, that's what you have there. So there is plenty of options. All right, pilots, this is an incredible board, just packing so many features from head to toe. It really is nice to see a board with this many features and this many options and so many things outside of the box. That way, if you're depending which type you are, those two types of pilots, because there are two types. If you're that type that wants to build something incredible, build out of the realm in which we live in inside of FPV, and you really want to push the bar and do something awesome, this is going to be the flight controller to do it with. Or just maybe you want to have those options, have those features available at your fingertips. This board is gonna be for you. So although it's not hot off the press, I did want to take the time to go over it with you guys, show you guys how awesome this board is. I've got a link to it down in the video description. I hope that you guys learned something about this board, and I hope that you guys might run out and get your own, and I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I will see you on the next one.